We kind of heard and thought it was a bit of a myth about the crocodiles swimming around the boat in the phosphorescence at night, throwing all of our food, fish scraps overboard, doing all the wrong things. And then about one night, basically under a full moon, saw a couple of eyes.
Oh, wow.
20 metres off the boat, and it was a 3-metre saltwater crocodile that knew that we were there. And we just watched it for half an hour swimming around the boat.
Wow.
And stopped swimming in the water overnight after that.
Are you ready, boys? Start swimming.
That's Torren Martin. I'm Jamie Brissick. This is Soundings, brought to you by the Surfer's Journal. The Journal is a member-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from FCS, Finisterre, Howler Brothers, Outerknown, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. More like a book than a magazine, the Journal delivers 136 pages of independent storytelling every 8 weeks, covering the people, culture, travel, and art of surfing. To learn more and to subscribe, please visit surfersjournal.com. This episode of Soundings is presented by Costa Sunglasses. If you're anything like me and you spend lots of time around the water, then you know just how important it is to have a good pair of shades. And since 1983, when a group of intrepid outdoorsmen set out to make sunglasses that could stand up to the harsh environments they regularly encountered, Costa remains the choice in eyewear among those committed to life on the water. So whether you're diving in, climbing aboard, suiting up, sliding one, leaning back, or all the above, head to costadelmar.com to grab your pair and to see what's out there. Born in 1990 in Bangalow, Australia, not far from Byron Bay, Torren Martin is hailed as one of the great stylists of our time, riding all manner of surfcraft, and with a special penchant for twin fins. He's also one of surfing's great explorers. In 2016, he and his filmmaker pal Ishka Folkwell spent 3 months circumnavigating Australia in a Land Rover, riding A-grade waves and documenting the trip in the first installment of the film series Lost Track. In 2018, the duo did a similar trip around New Zealand, this time on motorcycles. In 2019, they bought a Ford Transit and drove it from Europe down to the west coast of Africa on a surf hunt. In 2022, Torren and his partner, Aiyana Powell, bought a sailboat in Thailand and spent an entire year exploring surf breaks in and around Indonesia. Torren was recently in California screening his new film, Calypte, which documented the year spent sailing and surfing and is named after their boat. We spoke at the Brothers Marshall Malibu Surf Shop. Surrounding us were Mourning the Earth t-shirts, which seemed apropos, as much of that iconic film was shot in and around the region where Torren grew up. Torren, welcome to the show.
Cool. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you've been in, we were just talking about Santa Barbara, and your wife is from Santa Barbara, and I realize there's a bit, Santa Barbara and Byron Bay, where you come from, have a lot in common in some way.
They do. I think quite a few people make that similarity.
Yep.
And both relatively small surfing, fishing towns, I think, originally, and have grown in popularity because of that.
Yep.
Right-hand point breaks.
Yeah, the right-hand point breaks. That's kind of, I think definitely they have something in common in that they've both sort of blown up. When I was growing up, it was much more of a fishing town. Now it's like super expensive in Montecito in that area. But I guess the thing specifically is like the right-hand point breaks and being this sort of place where a lot of design was birthed, right? Like the shortboard revolution. I mean, George Greenough kind of started in Santa Barbara before he made his way to Byron, northern New South Wales.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's the perfect example is George.
Yeah.
But yeah, both towns. I mean, a lot of Californians made their way to Byron.
Yeah.
In the east coast of Australia.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's definitely that sort of connection and that draw.
Yeah.
The right hand point breaks.
Yeah.
Surfers traveling far across the world for them.
Yeah.
Which we're still all doing today. Byron is a very transient, popular place to surf. and visit, and Santa Barbara and the west coast of California
Yeah.
too.
Where did you ride your first waves?
In Byron Bay, first wave I ever rode was at Talos Beach,
Okay.
which is the back beach of the Cape.
Yep.
That was my first taste of waves, but then I didn't actually start surfing until I was up in the northwest in Broome, Early Beach, which is not really a surf beach, but I was about 6 or 7, and that's where I have my first memories. The bug.
Yep. And when you got the bug and got serious, who were the surfers that you looked up to?
I remember growing up watching a lot of Taylor Steele's films. I remember the trilogy films, the Momentum films. I grew up in a small surfing community with friends doing our local board riders. And the guys that were in the open division there were guys like Danny Wills, Craig Wharton, which were I guess some of the influences and surfing characters and idols and stuff in our local community.
Did you at any point want to take the contest route, or did you always know that you would sort of go on a different path as a professional?
No, I never. Look, I was doing competitions in the local board riders and the regional contests as a Grom because my friends were doing it and it was fun. I think I did 1 or 2 pro junior contests when I was 17, 18, and I realized kind of I wasn't really getting results, and I realized the money that I had saved up in my back pocket that I was spending to get to these contests, I'd rather be spending to go to Indonesia or, kind of adventures of my own sort of thing.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
it wasn't till, the surfing as a career, it's only been the last sort of 10 years or so, or less, that that has became, my kind of livelihood, and it kind of just fell into place. Yeah.
So your motivation was more just to go travel and ride good waves than try to be a pro and sort of make that thing work with sponsorships and money, etc.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Growing up working part-time jobs and full-time jobs, I'd always just be saving to go on the next trip. But there was never any pressure or anything. I didn't grow up in a surfing family.
Yeah.
So it was mostly just being around friends and wanting to surf good waves and travel. That was kind of my motivation.
So in more recent years, have there been surfers that you look at as models of sort of like, that's a cool way to do it?
Absolutely. I've kind of draw inspiration. One thing I love is and appreciate is when I'm traveling myself and I see someone or meet someone that's traveling that I have never met before, never heard of before, and they're out there, dedicated to chasing waves. And I find that, sometimes they'll be the most, hardest charging person out there, and you're in the middle of nowhere and you're like, I really respect and appreciate that side of it. I think it's really cool. I have a lot of appreciation and respect for all surfers, like I'm not at all opposed or, different to the professional competitive surfers that are out there following the tour and stuff. I think, I love watching that surfing as well. Guys like John and, the guys in top league there, Stephanie Gilmore. And I feel like surfing, we are very much sharing something that we all love.
Yep.
And we all have something, it's very subjective. We all have something to take from it.
Yeah.
I feel like we're all on the same page there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny because I think you would be known for great surfing, but also kind of traveling to far-flung places, et cetera. And in many ways, that's what pro surfing is too. It's travel, and some of those places we've seen more of them, but they are people travel to them. So traveling is like built into the whole thing. Can you remember early trips where you realized this is something you really like and this is what you want to do?
Yeah, growing up, I would often my mum and my grandma are both jewelry makers and work in the second-hand clothes trade, and my grandma's been going to Indonesia for 40 odd years, and my mum followed suit. So I'd always get taken along with them. So I grew up with a real fondness to Indonesia, and my kind of attraction to the waves and everything there.
Yep.
That's kind of where that bug started.
Yeah.
And Indonesia is known for its perfect waves. But growing up in Australia, we're very fortunate with the wages, and a lot of my friends and my peers and above me would, it was kind of almost tradition to kind of, you'd work part-time through school, you'd save up, you'd buy a round-the-world ticket.
Yeah.
And, I think a couple of grand, you'd have a few grand in the bank that you'd saved up, and then you'd just kind of go. And that would be the first thing you would do out of school.
Yes.
Is basically 6 or 12 months and just travel. So it was kind of like, obviously with my parents, my mum, my grandma being travelers.
Yeah.
It felt very normal.
Yep. I always loved that. And I lived in Australia in the early 90s it was. And I noticed that it was sort of this distinct cultural difference between the USA and Australia. And I think in some ways, this country, there's far less of that. It's much more of you get out of high school, you go straight to college, and you set up this future for yourself without really ever necessarily going outside the US border. Whereas in Australia, there was this thing of we got to go out and see the world. And I always really loved and respected that, actually, because I thought that's like not probably the biggest thing in my life has been traveling, and it's opened my eyes. And I think so much of my perspective on the world has been shaped by traveling. Mm-hmm. So your most recent trip was around the world in a sailboat for a year.
It was, yeah.
How'd it go?
It was a journey, for sure. We basically sailed from Pattaya, which is up in the Gulf of Thailand, up near Bangkok, down the South China Sea, around Singapore, up the Malacca Strait, and into the Indian Ocean, around Sumatra and south of Java to Lombok. It was about 5,000 nautical miles, and nearly 12 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
So surfing being a priority, well, first of all, staying afloat, but then surfing. But based on what I've seen in your film, a lot of the waves look like you might be the only guy out. Did you do a lot of sort of work in advance to know where you might find the waves? Or how did you sort of find all the spots?
Yeah, that was right. I did surf a lot by myself up there. I got pretty into, obviously Google images, satellite images and Google Maps, and we kind of plan ahead, mostly, to be honest, for anchorages, trying to find safe, protected anchorages.
Yep.
But often with the bathymetry of a bay that leads itself to a safe anchorage will be a nice reef around either side. But yeah, I mean, when we started the trip, when I was dreaming about sailing and surfing, I kind of very much I was just imagining I'd just be so stoked to just have 1 or 2 sessions that it's just us and the boat and fun waves. And we certainly got that. I think
It certainly looks like it, based upon the film. What a nice thing to be doing in the present day, to pull up to an empty, beautiful wave. It's just so hard to find.
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly worked for it. We put in the time. It was definitely a mission, and it took us to some very remote places that are, hard to get to otherwise. Mm-hmm.
So it's so easy for us to sort of project or imagine what it would be like to go sailing around the world. What was and it's easy to see the idyllic thing of like riding great waves and being alone and all that stuff that's hard to find in the present day. But there had to have been like sketchy situations. Was there any? What was the sketchiest?
It was all kind of sketchy. I think due to my lack of experience. in a way, I mean, not all sketchy, but I feel like I was very much on edge for a lot of the trip, and you kind of need to be very vigilant and aware. I think that's just hand in hand with living on a boat and boats in general. You're kind of always preventing something going pear-shaped.
Yep.
Earlier on in the trip, we had a couple of people with experience that helped us, and, you know, really taught us a lot about the boat, and going through a few situations with them taught us a lot about ourselves as well, and how to handle those situations. There were a lot of sleepless nights and getting dragged around on anchor and resetting the anchor, and you know, there'd be new sounds in the engine, there'd be new oil leaks, there'd be sails sort of tearing apart, not ripping, you know, and falling apart. And there's one event in particular that we have in the film that we talked about, that was basically my partner and I, it was just the two of us on board at the moment, and it was in the middle of the night, and we were between two islands, about 30 odd miles from land either way, and yeah, we believe we were taking on water. The engine was nearly completely swamped, and we were kind of, you know, had a bit of a heart in your mouth, kind of head in your hands situation where we, you know, had to really gather ourselves and pull ourselves together, and had to make a couple of calls a big call to turn around basically and head back to the safest anchorage so we could diagnose what was going on. That ended up only being a small valve, and you know, like, it could have been consequential had I have not checked the bilge, which was a routine check. But there were, we had other times where we were passing through, you know, channels, and one of the fuel barrels had dislodged itself and was around 20 litres of diesel, like, in a jug, flying around the deck, and had to wrestle that out. And there's never a dull moment on the boat, for sure.
The stakes are high, right? I mean, it's not like we're so used to having someone nearby to sort of rescue us if need be in life.
You're very much alone, and that's the beauty of it too. You're very much, you know, forced to be self-sufficient. And some of our favourite moments were, you know, when you can't see land and you're making passages, and it's the middle of the night and the stars are, you know, reflecting off the water, and others when you sit in a safe little mangrove anchorage and living on, you know, eggs and fruit and veggies, and jumping in the tender, zipping through the mangroves to surf a fun little wave. With a couple of you.
What was the most sort of surprising part? Like when you were imagining the trip, and then when actualizing it, was there? I mean, I would guess that your mind goes to places that you wouldn't expect. You know, you get this space, right?
Yeah, that aloneness we loved. Like, it can be a challenge. I mean, a 35-foot boat, you're within 35 feet of someone else at all times, and you're also very much, I guess, confronted by, you know, the waste that you make, everything in your space, and you're responsible for that. You know, you are basically responsible for everything and everyone on that boat, and yourself. So for me, that was the biggest challenge, I think, was just the pressure and the responsibility. And that, you know, that kind of, even though the legs that we were sailing kind of got, I guess, gnarlier, more consequential, with experience over the year, my confidence grew. And, you know, there were certainly times where I didn't think I could go on without help. And I overwhelmed myself and kind of got in my head a lot. And then, yeah, it was a journey, a personal and a physical journey for sure.
Yep. Who was on the boat for the majority of it? Just you and your partner or your wife?
Yeah. So yeah, it was mostly Aiyana and I. We were both on it for the whole duration, and then for the first leg, we had a fella named George. He came for the first 2.5 weeks, and he's an ex-diesel mechanic. Sailed Southeast Asia for 20 odd years, and knew the place like the back of his hand. And the boat hadn't been used for about 2 or 3 years, so that was perfect. He knew the boat before.
Yep.
And there were a few things happened that he ironed out, and he taught us a lot about the boat. And then Kelly, another friend, he came for the next leg, which was about 4 weeks. And he's a filmmaker and sailor himself. So at that stage, I'd been on the boat for 3 weeks, which isn't that long, but it was enough to kind of know the working parts of the boat and get a bit familiar with how it handled.
Yep.
And I asked Kelly if while he's there, if Aiyana and I can, because after he left, we kind of knew that we were going to be essentially on our own or weaning off. So basically that, we were making the calls and he was there to fall back on and to back us up, which he did and was great. And then Ryan, our other good friend who owns Need Essentials, he's a sailor himself. He taught us a few things on his little boat before we started the trip, and he came as Kelly left for 2 weeks. And then it was, then when he left, we were on our own, basically, with a couple of friends that joined us throughout the rest of the year, but, as crew, just to, hang out and surf or help us document the trip.
How did the idea for the trip come about?
Well, so I first met Aiyana about 5 years ago, and one of the first things that I learned from her was that she'd grown up on a boat with her brother and her mum and her dad. And she spent, a good chunk of the first sort of 10 years of her life sailing down the Pacific Ocean here from California down to Guatemala.
Okay.
And I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And she had this desire. We started talking about sailing because at the time I was starting to have this curiosity about it. And we just got really excited and dreamt of both getting a boat. So we, it all kind of snowballed from there, really.
How'd you guys meet, or where did you guys meet?
We met in the surf at the pass.
Great.
Yeah. Aiyana was on a little trip of her own. She had an old Ford Falcon wagon and was just sort of cruising her way down the east coast of Australia.
So it was like familiar. You guys were, that's sort of how you've lived, as I understand it.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. I invited her to come and park her car on the property where I was living, where I have my caravan parked. And yeah, she slept in her car first few nights, and then we kind of moved in together after that.
That's so great.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you and I are sitting here in Malibu in Los Angeles, a metropolitan city. We're near the beach, but it is a big city, and not a lot of people, I guess in the surf community they do, but if you step outside of surfing, not a lot of people, understand or are interested in that kind of moving around and seeing new places and staying open to all that, I guess,
Yeah, there's challenges with both, I think, and pros and cons of both.
Yeah.
It's or maybe not, more I think sacrifices is something, like having that groundedness and that community of staying in one place compared to someone that moves around a lot, doesn't get to really see the seasons and have that kind of connection and groundedness to it. It's all a balance. I think, like I certainly, when I've been traveling a lot, crave that, home in view and want to just stay put, but I also get very quickly antsy to kind of travel again. I've still loved traveling and want to keep traveling as long as possible.
Yep. What about surfboards? What have you been riding?
During the trip and Indonesia itself, I've liked riding a much shorter board because, mostly my experience in Indonesia who's surfing lefts on my backhand, and I prefer a shorter board. So before this Indonesian sailing trip, I was riding a lot of mid lengths in the mid 6 to high 7 foot range. And then that boat trip kind of lent itself to a shorter board. So I guess for that duration of that trip, I was more focused on shorter boards, my backhand. And there's a model that that Simon and I developed over that year on the boat, which I did find myself riding a lot. But now that I'm sort of back in, I guess, surfing right hand point breaks and things, I'm kind of craving getting back on a longer, 7 foot sort of mid length.
Yep. Who shapes your boards?
Simon Jones. Simon Jones is his name. He and I have been friends and had a working shaping surfing relationship for about 10 years. And it's over that time, I mean, the time that we met, he really brought this new exciting aspect to my surfing through his surfboards. I guess I was kind of craving something new, and he originally shaped this. It was like a little 5/7 6-stringer, 6-channel single fin for a board test that I was a part of, and it was a beautiful shape looking board, but I'd never really connected with single fins. And I rode that board a couple of times and ended up basically just routing 2 twin fin plugs into it, and loved it. Couldn't get off it. And so Simon and I that's how our relationship started. And it's been twin fins ever since then. That's maybe 2015 or so, 16. And I think, through the duration of our relationship, the boards that we have kind of developed have really fit a particular part and time of my life and place that I've been traveling to as well. I think that is probably, the most common thing would be, basically having an idea or a dream to travel to somewhere, say J-Bay or Fiji or Mexico, and having a particular board that I would have liked to surf at that place. And that's when I look back at the history of our relationship and the boards that we've kind of developed together.
What are you looking for in your surfing? And I know that sounds like an odd question, but I think that there are so many top surfers who compete, and they're really, to some extent, like tied to the judges and what wins a heat. And you being sort of removed from that. When you go in the water, what are you looking for? What fires you up?
I think that's a great question. It really depends on the waves that I'm surfing, which is kind of what I touched on just before. But I like to keep surfing refreshing and new, and I like being challenged by different waves. And for me, I like to imagine the surfboard fitting in different parts of the wave. And for my forehand, surfing a long drawn out point break or something, a bigger board that's more paddle power and foam, and it's going to have fit in an open face wave. It's hard. I don't quite know the answer, because what I'm searching for in my surfing is always changing by the waves. I'm not just sort of tracking down one feeling, apart from getting barreled, which I just absolutely love.
No, you seem to spend a lot of time in the barrel.
I do. I like the barrel. I have all these kind of different waves going through my head at the moment, and different boards and different feelings. A few months ago, surfed Chopu in Tahiti for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And that was really exciting for me, surfing that wave. It's a wave that I dreamed of surfing for a long time, and it didn't get too big. It was sort of, I think, maybe 6 foot, a few 6 to 8 foot was kind of the extent of it. But that is kind of like a dream wave, a perfect, slabbing barrel.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, there I wanted to surf something shorter on my back end again, and because you kind of need to be under it. But
yeah. What was surprising about Chopu, given it was your first time and you've probably watched it for years and years and watched lots of clips of it, what being actually out there and pulling in it, what was different than what you expected?
Yeah, it's funny, a place like that has been so heavily kind of publicized, and you have a lot of, you have a pretty clear idea of how you imagine it to look. And it was very much that, but I guess that end section about, where it kind of goes dry and closes out, that kind of comes up pretty fast.
Yep.
And I definitely ended up on the reef a few times in there. The wave itself I found hard to get deep on. It's a lot shorter than I thought, and at the time I think we had quite a west swell, which doesn't stretch it out as much. It makes it kind of short and intense, and kind of right on that bowl.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, and it has so many different moods as well. So, we had some fun waves.
Yeah. What about away from surfing? What are your interests?
I'm kind of diving into this sort of sailing world nowadays. It's consuming me a bit in a positive way. It's this new feeling and sensation that I've kind of been chasing. It's the boat. Obviously, that year on the boat was a great kind of introductory to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With being on the water, sailing, do you find similarities to that in surfing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sensation of sailing for me, sailing was as good as a good day surfing.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah. I had a really fond memory of being in the Maldives and being on a boat trip and pulling up to this small island that had this like beautiful sort of right-hand reef on the end of it, and we surfed it for the day, and then we decided we were going to surf it the next day, so we anchored very, very close to it, and I was sleeping up on the top of this boat under the stars, nothing above us, and the swell was rising through the night, and the wave was so perfect that it sounded almost like ripping paper. It was like this perfect sound, and as I was listening to it through the night, the louder it got, the more the boat would rock afterwards, and like a set would actually. And I thought to myself, I'm as like connected to the wave as I've ever been, and I'm sleeping on a boat. I'm not even on a surfboard right now. Yeah. But you must have had like a ton of those type of experiences.
Yeah, that like kind of gave me goosebumps talking about it because, there's so many elements when you're on the boat, and situations like that at anchorages where you can hear the wave. But you get so in tune with everything.
Yes, that's it.
I think that's the. It's the same when you go camping and you're sleeping under the stars and there's the flapping of the tent, or you can hear something howl at the night, or kangaroos bouncing around. I feel like boats very much. First of all, there's obviously the kind of the reliance that you have on the boat and yourself, and you're kind of there removed from everything.
Yeah.
But I love how in tune and responsible, you're very accountable for your actions and everything on there, and in control of, as much in control as not, at the mercy of Mother Nature. But I love that side of it.
Yeah. Any shark stories?
Closest interaction that I've had to a shark was about a 3.5 meter white that went straight under me, and it was the most kind of calming, I guess, experience. And it was like this. It was almost like it was probably the best experience that I could have had, to be honest. I think because I'll tell this one first, but I was sitting there in wouldn't say a crowded lineup, but there were maybe 20 people spread out over a few hundred meters on a crystal clear day. Water was very clear, and I was sitting there just looking up, and I looked down at my feet, and a 3.5 meter white just cruised right below me. And
where was this?
At Broken.
Okay.
Behind where I live.
Yeah.
10 minutes from home. And I just kind of like looked down at my feet, then did the second take and just went, oh my God, and just watched this thing just cruise. You know, it wasn't on a mission, didn't feel threatening. And I just sort of sat and watched it, and it went under another couple of surfers. They didn't unbeknowingly, you know, and then kind of made its way out. And obviously my heart was racing, but I felt safe in a way. Like it wasn't that kind of, not some of those experiences that some of my friends have had, you know, and stories that I've heard, sort of thing. It was, you know, I kind of shat myself, and I was, you know, but I was also felt very kind of calm by it, and it's nice to see them not on them, you know, thrashing around and kind of after you, because they're not, you know. Another instance I had was with my friend Laurie Towner, and we were fishing out off the coast of northwest Australia, fishing for mackerel, and we were on pretty light gear, and we're in a little inflatable boat a few miles offshore, and we basically, there was a lot of reef sharks, grey nurses and bull sharks, and they started frenzying and were, you know, taking the mackerel off our lines, and basically one came and just smashed the engine of the boat, and seeing them like that was just a total free-for-all. You know, you did not want to be near the water like that. So I've had plenty of, you know, times where I've seen sharks in the back of waves and around, but I've never had anything to, I've never felt very threatened. I feel like, I don't know, intuition is a big part of it. And I've definitely surfed a lot alone in some remote parts of Australia where I've just had to paddle myself in because I just couldn't enjoy myself anymore.
Because your head was playing games.
Yeah. Totally. Sharks scare me, and I'm very much aware of, you know, them. And like they do get in my head, especially surfing a lot alone.
And your part of the world's had a surge of shark sightings, attacks, etc. in the last decade for sure. They're pretty on the east coast of Australia. We do have a lot of juvenile whites and bull sharks, and then down south there's the big, you know, the big whites and West Oz too. It's they're definitely around, and I like to just imagine that it's a pretty balanced ecosystem out there, and you know, we're not really on their menu. I'd like to spend more time in the water with them and you know, getting to know their kind of patterns and movements, because I feel like that's the best experience we can have, is like a non-confronting, scary experience with them. Because I've seen plenty diving underwater, and you know, it's beautiful to watch, and I feel like when you know they're there, you're kind of at peace and feel a lot more with yourself. It's when you kind of don't, and you feel like something's watching you. Or And the fear thing, because I sometimes wonder if they pick up on fear the same way, say, dogs do, or horses do that too, you know, where if they sense what you're feeling, and your fear can throw their energy off too. At least that's one theory. Yeah,
I've heard that. I agree with that. How about you? Have you had any experience?
No, I once was at Jeffreys Bay, and it was small J Bay. It was very, very clear. I was sitting next to Rock Little, who was a surfer that I grew up with, who passed away, a great big wave surfer. And I saw something sort of dart underneath us, and I looked at him, and I said, "Brock, was that a shark?" And just as I said it, it popped up, and there was the fin, and there was a guy sitting further out, and it went and circled this guy. And the guy did everything perfect. Like he was straddling his board, and then he just got on his belly and put everything, so there was no appendages hanging off. And the shark circled him. A little wave came. I looked at Brock, and we just shrugged and went, well, nothing we can do. Let's go in. So we went, and it was very small, so it was very close to the rocks. So we just like belly boarded this wave in and stood on the rocks there at J Bay and watched the shark keep circling. And I remember thinking, this is going to be a shark attack, and do I want to watch it? Like I actually thought, like, should I just turn away right now because this is going to be traumatizing? And it circled a little bit more. I mean, the whole thing probably lasted a minute and a half, 2 minutes, but it felt like 10 minutes. And then finally it just did like one wider circle, and then it just kept going and just left the guy. And the guy turned, started paddling in. a wave that anyone would have caught, he missed because he was so like frozen stiff by the whole thing. And then he came to shore and forgot he even had his board. Like he climbed onto shore and just like dragged his board over the rocks with his leg rope, and then sort of sat down. And there was a bunch of people watching at this point. You know, it was long enough of a time that like everyone thought they were going to see a shark attack. So there was a group of us, and the guy we were all like saying close call, you know, and he was in this like totally gone state. And he sort of put his head down, started shaking his head like you could almost see like fear just flying off of him. And he just like shook his head and just started laughing kind of hysterically and just went, fuck, fuck, fuck. And then like laughed. And then he was like back with us. And he was like, wow, that was so close. And we were like, yeah, we thought you were gone, you know? So it was such a wild experience. And at that time, I didn't know there had been a lot less shark activity at J Bay. This would have been like 89 probably. And then I think the next year there was an attack there, maybe a fatal one. And then J Bay was sort of much more known for sharks. And then, of course, there was the McFanning thing and et cetera. But yeah.
Oh, what a roller coaster.
Yeah.
That would have been
For sure.
wild.
No, I know. And I was really curious to sort of, it just seemed like the shark wasn't interested. I was recently talking to Mark Healy, the surfer from Hawaii, great waterman. He's done a lot of work with sharks. And he was talking about great white juveniles and how a lot of times they learn to hunt mammals, right? Like seals. And they just don't quite know how to do it. And he described it as being like at a high school dance where like a guy's trying to pick up on a girl and doesn't like know how to do it. And the juveniles will just like bite things in a very dumb way, you know? And so he thought like maybe that's sometimes what happens when humans get attacked. It's like, the shark doesn't want you, but it's just poking around and trying things.
Yeah, I can totally see that. That's how I like to imagine it, you know? Like
It's a better story than the other.
we had a crazy experience when we were up on the sailboat in Indonesia.
Okay.
Up near the equator there. And my partner and I were anchored there for about 6 or 7 weeks in one little mangroves. And some of the local fishermen had told us that there's saltwater crocodiles around.
Wow.
And they have a very different, I think, approach to their hunting, where they're very, you know, it's premeditated and studied, I believe. And so we kind of heard and thought it was a bit of a myth about the crocodiles swimming around the boat in the phosphorescence at night, throwing all of our food, fish scraps overboard, doing all the wrong things. And then about one night, basically under a full moon, saw a couple of eyes.
Oh, wow.
Maybe 20 meters off the boat, and it was a 3-meter saltwater crocodile that knew that we were there, and we just watched it for half an hour swimming around the boat.
Wow.
And stopped swimming in the water overnight after that. That put the heebie-jeebies up us big time. We ended up seeing the crocodile the following day going into the fish pens in the little village that's there. But crocodiles are another
that
story.
sounds really scary.
Yeah.
And there are a lot up in the north, right?
Yeah. We have a lot in the north of Australia.
Yeah. Have you surfed a lot up there?
The northwest, I've surfed quite a bit up there. Crocodiles kind of start northern Queensland.
Yep.
There's some big saltwater crocodiles up there. All the top end of Australia.
Yeah.
Northwest of Australia, I think they get a few, but it's not really a problem for an issue with surfing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's talk about future projects.
So I guess, one really exciting thing going on at the moment is Dave and I are building a 30-foot catamaran, wooden catamaran at home, which has been a kind of trip. So when we kind of came off the boat from the sailing trip, Dave and I have kind of connected through surfing, Dave Rastovich.
Yep.
And been friends from home, and we both kind of shared this kind of bug for sailing too, and that's kind of where we gelled. And we've basically, long story short, we're building a 34-foot wooden catamaran on his property at home.
Wow. Great.
Where we're living at the moment. And yeah, it's kind of, the idea is to basically the boat we're building it's a 30-foot Polynesian inspired catamaran by a designer, adventure philosopher, James Warham. And it's a pretty simple construction made for the novice builders.
Okay.
So, I mean, we've kind of, beauty about these boats is they've got a shallow draft. They sail well to wind, and it's a simple construction. So, and a very safe and seaworthy boat. That with the idea of building a boat with your own hands and sailing it is kind of like
incredible.
The ultimate. And having
Yeah.
a friend, a mate to do it with that shares a similar dream is pretty cool. I met a fella in Tasmania about 4 years ago, Mick Carter, his name is, and he introduced me to the James Warham designs, which is he'd actually built one of the tiki designs, a 46-foot tiki. Took him about 8 years to build. And since then I'd been obsessed with the idea of building one. I thought that's what I was going to do, and I had bought the plans and I was going to build the boat. And then Ryan, friend, he said, well, you've never actually gone sailing before, why don't you try sailing first?
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And then fast forward to now, Dave was kind of like, well, let's build one, and we're basically well into that, and kind of want the boat to be a bit of a vessel for environmental advocacy, a place for people to learn and have fun. It's not, we don't so much want it to be ours, we want it to kind of become a bit of a living organism where it can kind of sustain itself, and bring joy to people. Obviously we want to have some rad adventures on it, and great to make some films and do that. But there's a really cool group, the Citizen Science group, that are doing all the reef mapping, Great Barrier Reef, and for the Pacific Islands, and there's a lot of opportunities, and people and places to connect with, that I feel like that's going to be a really great, little thing that kind of,
It's exciting.
Yeah.
And you're a new father.
I am.
How does it feel?
It's great. It's the biggest journey yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, when we were talking earlier about all these exotic places, I was saying probably the most exotic one is being a dad.
Yeah. It has been such a beautiful journey. We found out that Aiyana was pregnant in the last month of the trip on the boat on Calypte, and then majority of the pregnancy was at home in Australia, where our little girl was born. Aiyana did such an amazing job and had really special pregnancy and birth. Little girl was born outside under the full moon, and it was the most profound, beautiful experience of my life. And Aiyana is just such an incredible mum, and you get to see the world through like a whole new set of eyes, and this whole new love that you've never felt before. And it's amazing. It's like I feel like we've been very, very fortunate, but a lot of people kind of like tell you not the bad things, how hard it is, but it's just so good. It's amazing.
That's so cool. And you're here in California now with your family, and you've been touring the film, right?
Right, yeah. So we've got a Kelly, who I mentioned, who joined us on the boat. He's been working on a series of his own that kind of documents and tells the story of like the surfer and surfboard relationship. A lot of self-shaped boards by the surfers, and I mean, when Kelly was on the boat, he was very intrigued by a particular board that Simon had made me, that we'd built together. And this film, we've called it The Ugly Duckling, because the first version of the board came out pretty funny looking. And he basically dove into the relationship between Simon and I, and where that board basically started and has finished more or less. So it's a short 30-minute film that we're having a handful of screenings up and down the west coast, California.
Nice. Are you surprised? I know you have many fans in the surf community. Is it surprising when you show up to these and you have a lot of people who sort of know you from your work and your films, etc.?
Yeah, it trips me out. It makes me feel kind of weird, like it's I mean, I love connecting with people and people that have connected to the films, and I love that side of it, but it trips me out.
It's funny because there's so much of, at least my perception of you is in remote places with not a lot of people around, surfing incredible waves and surfing incredibly well. And the idea of like going to Venice Beach and having a screening and having a bunch of people kind of come around and be like, oh, I love the way you surf. What kind of board you're riding or whatever. It's almost the opposite of that experience of the making of.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah. It's like this polar kind of, very far removed and then very far immersed. And it's all a balance. But I mean, a lot of the films that Ishka and I do with Need Essentials are part of, putting in, living the journey is one thing. Getting to relive it while we make the film and kind of share that story with people in a cinema or place is really great as well. It's an opportunity to bring community together and hang out and share that experience. So, and then, over the years, it's really cool to hear, if a film or journey has inspired someone to do something similar. Then I think it's good fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Torren.
My pleasure.
Great chatting.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Soundings is brought to you by the Surfer's Journal and is produced by me, Jamie Brissick, and Jonathan Shiflett. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Our theme song is Give Me a Wave by Oscar Matumia and Paz Lenchantin. The Surfer's Journal is a reader-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from FCS, Finisterre, Howler Brothers, Outerknown, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. The journal is published bi-monthly. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to visit surfersjournal.com and subscribe. This episode of Soundings is presented by Costa Sunglasses, the badge of the explorer. For over 40 years and counting, Costa has remained steadfast in their dedication to not only crafting the most durable, functional, and long-lasting eyewear, but in protecting our waterways and natural resources. Whether you're on the back deck scanning for yellowtail, eyeing a set swinging wide at an empty point, camped out on a bluff at the end of a rotted two-track, or anywhere and everywhere in between, Costas are built to help you see what's out there. Head over to costadelmar.com today to find just the right pair for you, no matter where the water takes you. Thank you for listening to Soundings, and until next time.